When I talk about movies, I usually like to talk about movies I love, but there's a question that comes up every now and then: what is the worst movie you ever saw? And that's a question I find hard to answer, but I'll do my best.
Garbage Day!
So the term worst movie has somewhat of a loose definition. There was a book in 1980 called the Golden Turkey Awards, which gave out awards for worst films in different categories. And the overall award for worst film ever was Plan 9 from Outer Space. So for a while it had that reputation, but it was never truly the worst film ever. It's far too entertaining. There's far worse sci-fi films of the 50s. There's even far worse Ed Wood movies. The runner-up in that book was The Exorcist II: The Heretic, which is a ludicrous movie. It makes no sense, but it's hilarious and, once again, too entertaining. To me, I think the worst film should be devoid of any entertainment. Since 1981, the Golden Raspberry Awards, known as the Razzies for short, has been giving out annual awards for worst films, sort of like an opposite version of the Oscars, which I talked about recently. Likewise, the film selections can't be taken too seriously, but it's just amusing. Well, not quite as amusing as the Oscars has turned into. Geez, but as an example, the Razzies chose Howard the Duck as the worst film of '86. Now, I think Howard the Duck was an example of a movie that was hurt by hype. It had the George Lucas name on it. It was based on a Marvel character. It was a movie that was so confident it would be a hit, they were already talking about a sequel. And then it flopped. So was it really the worst film ever at the time, or even the worst film of '86? Not at all, but it was the disappointment factor and mainstream attention that earned it the label.
Sounds like a bunch of bullpucky to me.
In the 90s, it was Troll 2. This one brought in a whole new generation of people who would answer that question. What's the worst film? Troll 2.
Oh my God!
Not even close, but it's been celebrated to this day. People love it because it's so bad. There's even a whole documentary about it called The Best Worst Movie. Makes sense to me, but what's the worst movie? It's not Batman and Robin. Sure, it's pretty bad, but it makes me laugh. And how many times does Mr. Freeze make an ice pun? You can make it into a drinking game.
What killed the dinosaurs? The Ice Age!
A worst film is one that you can't turn into a game. The new millennium brought us plenty more worst films of all time. Battlefield Earth, Freddy Got Fingered, The Master of Disguise. And then there was a wave of films that were so unbelievably bad, like The Room and Birdemic, where you're never sure if it was intentional or not. And then there came all those shark movies like Sharknado. By the time this video comes out, they're probably up to Sharknado 10. Yeah. So with these movies, you can't even count them because you know they're doing it on purpose. We've talked enough about movies that are so bad it's good, but what about so bad it's bad? When I'm asked what do I think is the worst film of all time, or at least what's the worst film I've ever seen, I don't think mainstream. I think it's something that nobody's talking about, something that was not made for the purpose of entertainment. I don't have a definitive answer, but the worst film that comes to mind, for me personally, is Wavelength from 1967. There is no enjoyment whatsoever. This is an experimental film, which I think is an experiment in torture. Let me tell you what this film's about. The fact is, it's about nothing. It's a shot of a wall with windows, but still a wall. And all that happens is you zoom into this wall over the course of 45 minutes. That's the total length of the film. You might think 45 minutes can't be so bad, but it feels like 10 hours. I doubt many people today have actually sat through the entire film, especially if you watch it on YouTube. I bet you're skipping through to see if anything happens. But I was subjected to it. When I first saw this, it was in film school. My professors would show us all these avant-garde films for good reasons, because we would never see this kind of film on our own time. I liked all my professors, and they even knew that some of these films, weren't so much fun to watch. And sometimes I liked what I saw, but this is one case where all my classmates universally despised it. Even the classes who came before us would warn us, oh, wait till you see Wavelength. So it had that reputation all around the university. Even the professors were like, yep, it's that time. And they would show us this kind of thing so we could have a conversation afterwards, and that's what I'm doing here. But the point is, I've had the experience of actually sitting in a darkened room, watching this on a big enough screen, not skipping around, but watching through the whole thing. And it made me feel like I was going insane. If it were just boring, that would be one thing. But no, this takes it another level. First of all, it's not even a great shot to look at. It's not a, beautiful shot of a mountain or landscape. It's just an ugly old studio apartment or whatever. And as the camera inches closer, it's not even a well-executed zoom. It's more like somebody is physically dragging the camera closer and closer. So if the whole point is a slow zoom, couldn't it at least be a nice, smooth zoom? As you move in, you begin to see less and less of the room, which starts to feel claustrophobic, especially when the windows go dark. There is, in fact, one major thing that happens. About 17 minutes in, a person walks into the frame and falls over dead. And the moment that happens, you're thinking, wow. You're sitting there the whole time like, okay. And then, whoa, it's a dead body. Somebody's dead. Wow. You never expect that a movie like this would have a body count. And what's the cause of death? What the hell happened? Who cares? You're just glad to get any mild form of entertainment. But that's it. That one precious moment, that's all you get. And as the camera moves in closer, you no longer see the body. I remember that being one of the main discussions in film class. When something lies outside the frame, does it exist? Something to think about. And true, as it goes on, you completely forget there's a dead body on the floor. It's not until about 30 minutes in, a woman comes in, calls the police, and reports it. But aside from these brief events, I swear, nothing else happens. Also, different colored filters keep getting put over the lens. It even goes into negative color at some point. You'd think changing it up would be nice, but instead it comes off as jarring. Sometimes the screen flickers and flashes back and forth or goes completely white, throwing you into a complete blinding limbo. Meanwhile, over the course of 45 minutes, there is a gradually increasing beeping sound. At first it's subtle. You think it's some kind of audio interference, some kind of unplanned intrusive sound, because nobody would intentionally put a sound like that in their film, right? But as it goes on, it gets louder and louder, especially if you're watching it in a small theater, which I hope you never have the misfortune of. It causes a reverb in the room. On YouTube at home, you can control the volume. I couldn't. Not only does the noise get louder and louder, it also gets higher in pitch until it reaches some unbearable frequency. In my film class, I'm not kidding, I had to cover my ears. So when you can't even listen to a movie, I'd say it's the worst. By the end, this film actually changes the way you feel. The experience of sitting through it from beginning to end is like some kind of negative hypnosis or a reverse meditation where you come out feeling paranoid and angry. And the whole time you're wondering if there's going to be any kind of payoff. Where does this zoom end up? Well, we move into the area between the windows, so now it's just wall. You don't even have the windows to look at anymore. And here, as you can see, is a photo of waves. Waves, as in wavelength. Is that what it's all about? The length it takes to get to the waves? Oh boy. Not to mention the increasing sound waves we're hearing. Eventually, the photo fills the entire frame, and we're just wishing we could be looking at a real ocean instead. And finally, the film ends, and you're now glad to be free to watch anything else. There are many who hail this as an avant-garde masterpiece. I don't mean to disrespect art or strike down the notion that people should get outside their comfort zone and experience more things, and view films that differ from the traditional commercial sense. Nothing against people who like it, nothing against the filmmaker, but I find no benefit of watching this. So, when somebody asks me, what's the worst film of all time, my mind goes to this type of thing. I'm not saying Wavelength is necessarily the worst film ever made, but it's films like this. If you want to go into experimental films that function as a form of mental torture, there's lots to explore. You might say this doesn't count because there's no story, but that's debatable. Somebody dies, somebody calls the police, so it kinda has a plot. But if you want to set some rules, you could ask, what is the worst narrative feature-length film? Or what is the worst narrative feature-length film that was theatrically released? So next time somebody says, Star Wars Phantom Menace is the worst film, no, you can do worse.